like to think of affairs as a catalyst. Either a couple is going to end or they're going to heal. And I oftentimes think of it as you're now having a new relationship. That relationship that you had is done, it's over, and you're crafting and cultivating a new partnership. And that new partnership can be so much more intimate and honest and transparent and growth filled in a way that really can be beautiful to witness on the other end of it.
I'm Rachel, and you're listening to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. All right, everyone, welcome back for another episode of Owning Your Sexual Self. We have on Dr. Allie, who might sound familiar if you're a listener of the podcast. We recently recorded an episode together on ruptures in relationships, whether that be intimate, friendships, parental, sibling, all of the things. So if you're interested in that and getting some good communication techniques, definitely go back and listen to that. And this episode, we are specifically focusing on affairs, which is a whole different understanding of a rupture in a relationship. And Dr. Allie, you're someone that has worked with couples and navigating through this, and you have some really good information that you want to share with us today on why affairs happen, how to navigate them, how to avoid them even, which some people are like, what? Right? So thank you so much for coming back on the show today.
Yeah, it's a joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so let's just dive right into it. Affairs. Let's start probably with the why, right? Why are these a thing? Why do these occur? And especially I think in a world where divorce rate is so high and monogamy is not said to be the norm, I'm using air quotes, in relationships, some would say affairs are inevitable in a relationship. So I'm excited again to dig into this. So in your take, why? Why do affairs happen?
Well, affairs can happen for a lot of reasons. And I think it's important to name an affair doesn't just mean sexually cheating on your spouse or partner.
Mhm.
Affairs can be emotional as well. Sometimes there's no physical contact at all, but you're breaking your agreements. And affairs can also happen in non-monogamous relationships when you're breaking the agreements that you have set for your relationship.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important to realize that affairs can look a lot of different ways and that they are incredibly common. I think part of the reason why they're so common is because and Esther Perel talks about this a lot in her book, The State of Affairs, which I think is phenomenal. We expect our partners to fulfill so many roles in our life, to be our partners, our best friends, our co-parent, our sexual flame, our hobby buddy, like whatever it is, right? There's a lot of pressure for them to show up and fulfill so many different roles and ways of relating. Monogamy and especially parenthood can sometimes start to feel a little monotonous and routine, and people can lose connection with themselves, with the part of them that had access to curiosity or excitement or passion or growth. Sometimes it's a need for validation, or there's a sense of aliveness that they've lost. And so people think that affairs are happening because you're not doing it for me anymore, so I need to find somebody else who does it for me better.
Mhm.
And I think oftentimes affairs are less about the relationship and more about the individual who's having the affair. And sometimes it's about needs, fundamental needs that aren't being met in the relationship. But oftentimes it's also about fundamental needs that they have as an individual that they don't know, either they're not aware that they have, or they don't know how to, or feel like they have access to attending to.
Mhm.
Um, and so they're hungry for that sense of aliveness, and they have this fantasy that the affair is going to be the answer, the fix it for them.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that conversation too is so helpful to be able to unpack, because I've heard too in affair work, and I'm glad you mentioned Esther Perel's book, State of Affairs, one of my favorite resources for people that are going through this. But I think that so often I hear if it was a sexual affair, it's so often not about the sex. I feel like it is more down that emotional route, and what was emotionally this person providing for you, or as you said, like what was this person and being around this person allowing me to see in myself or bring out better in myself. And I think we just got done with our episode on ruptures. I often think too, affairs are a result of not doing that hard work of keeping the ruptures, keeping the things to yourself and not being willing to step up to do the work. And so it's easier, right, to go and find a person where we know what the beginning of a relationship feels like, right? It's all the bells and whistles and the unicorns and the rainbows, and there's no conflict and it's happy-go-lucky. All those endorphins are firing off in the brain. And we lose that in long-term relationships, right?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah. So, when we're in a new dynamic, we have something called new relationship energy, which is a physiological experience where our body gets flooded with those endorphins and serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine, norepinephrine, a really intoxicating cocktail of hormones that make us feel quite literally high. It's an intoxicating feeling. It's addictive. It's really hard to turn away from NRE. And research shows that it changes brain function a little bit and it makes us less discerning. And so we don't see somebody else's flaws. We don't see through the fantasy of the newness and the shininess of a new relationship. And I think people love that. I love that feeling of NRE, and there's a part of me that misses that or that craves that intensity, and that in and of itself could be a reason why somebody is seeking out an affair.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you named that, and even NRE, right? Like this is a true thing that happens like in our body. It's a true physiological experience that people have. Yeah, it's like I get the new shirt, right? And it's the shirt that I want to wear all the time until I go to the store and I'm like, ooh, there's another new shirt that I really like. And now I hardly ever wear the other shirt that I just loved so much a few weeks ago. And I think in timeline too, they say that the NRE can last anywhere from 2 months to 2 years, is my understanding of it. So everyone's timeline on this of, right, sort of when this, I'll use air quotes, like fizzles out, it's very different. But I've had many podcasts around this of like what happens in long-term relationships and why we lose that connection and intimacy and all that. I almost feel like we go into an autopilot unless we're willing, as we talked about in the last episode, unless we're willing to step up and do the work and name this. Hey, I'm feeling disconnected. Hey, our intimate life hasn't been exactly what I want it to be, or I want to improve this because I love you. Or we're not communicating well, right? Like, unless someone's going to be willing to stand up and have that conversation and bring that up and be met with the validation and the empathy and all that we talked about. Yeah, that it's easier. It's easier essentially for a person to cheat, I think, than doing the hard work in the relationship.
Yes, it's scary to say I have a need that's not being met if you don't know if or how that need is going to get met. It's a lot easier to either deny and ignore the need or to outsource the need in an unethical way. And it's so important to be able to be open about your fantasies and your desires and your fears. And the reality is even if I think that sometimes things to do as a coach is to help people think more creatively about ways that they can find alignment around differences in desires or needs that they think are incompatible. But I also think simply being able to be open and honest and transparent and having the other person hear you and reassure and empathize, even if they're not able to meet that need, even if a threesome will never be on the table, if you can at least talk about it and feel heard and understood and have the other person not shame you or shut down, but like say, oh, like, yeah, I could really get why that would be hot. And it makes so much sense that you would be craving this. And like that in and of itself can be deeply healing and bonding. And I think people get afraid of the loss of NRE as though something is broken in the relationship. But I like to think of NRE as the opportunity to create the foundation of deeper, more secure, sustainable love. And we want to use that NRE in our primary nesting, established relationships to help us build the trust to have some of these more vulnerable conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, right, a person that is the one having the affair has a whole host of their emotional experience that they're going through. And, I kind of want to go through a couple different scenarios. So if an affair comes out in a relationship, do you find that there's a difference versus the person coming forward and sharing, hey, this has been going on versus getting found out?
Sure, yes. I think that part of what's so painful for the person who was cheated on is it's not just a betrayal of the trust within the relationship, but it's a betrayal of their ability to feel like they can trust themselves, their perception of reality, their intuition. If you've been cheating on me and I had no idea, then not only do I not trust you, but how do I trust myself to know when I'm safe in a relationship, when I can trust somebody? And that betrayal sometimes is even more painful and hard to repair.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one. I never even really looked at it that way until you just said that. I think yeah, that's important to be able to name that and for people to be able to reflect on that if they're going through an experience like this.
Yes, and so I think that when there can be more transparent conversation and more accountability and an honesty, then it can help to start to rebuild the trust in both of those ways, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about this in our previous episode of when conversation is happening or rupture is happening, not getting so honed in on the specifics. When we're talking about affairs, if a person finds right infidelity has happened, how important do you think it is for that person that has been cheated on to get the answers to the details of the affair?
I mean, I think that it is important because that helps them make sense of something that totally feels like it flips their sense of reality on its head. Now, of course, I think that there's certain details that aren't going to help anybody. Like, I don't need to know, exactly the nature of how the sex unfolded, but
Mhm.
I need to know when it happened or how many times it's happened, or certainly was protection used, or how did you feel about it, or what steps did you take to hide it? Or, all of these things can be orienting for somebody who feels so disoriented.
Mhm. Yeah. And in a sense where let's say somebody has information or they know they have factual things that they know that affair has occurred and they bring this to a partner and the partner is deny. How do you what how would you navigate that, would you say?
Well, I think you're digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole
Yeah.
because right now what you're doing is you're gaslighting them.
Mhm.
You're telling them that their perception of reality, their truth, their understanding of truth is invalid. And that's another betrayal. You're just layering the betrayals on top of each other. And what needs to happen is rebuilding trust. And that's a long and lengthy and complicated process, but it requires radical honesty. And
Mhm.
not just honesty about having the affair, but also honesty about why you had the affair. And not to use that explanation to defend yourself or to try to excuse it, but to bring more nuance. And because in order for that repair to happen, you have to both address the breach of trust and the hurt and the betrayal, but you also have to address the unmet needs that were happening and the motivations for the affair so that growth can happen, right? I like to think of affairs as a catalyst. Either a couple is going to end and it's a catalyst for their own individual growth, and the partnership, or they're going to heal. And I oftentimes think of it as you're now having a new relationship. That relationship that you had is done, it's over, and you're crafting and cultivating a new partnership. And that new partnership can be so much more intimate and honest and transparent and growth filled in a way that really can be beautiful to witness on the other end of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I often say the same thing to people, right? Like old relationship versus new relationship. And I've worked with couples going through affair where they have worked to create something even better than what their previous relationship was, like a relationship, a marriage, in some cases where right, like they're doing things that they never even thought would be imaginable because again, they're both willing to step up and do that hard work. But I like that you use like that term of radical honesty. And for the person that had the affair, I find it's like there's some work for them to do, right? As you said, unpacking why this occurred, what was I battling with, what was I challenged by, why did I choose this route? And I think right in this case, also for the other person, the person that's been cheated on, to be able to have their own individual support throughout that as well. I was right, have a couples person, have two individual people that are all separate. They're not ever the same person, so that I feel like I have a team me, a team you, and a team us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that that's really important. And I think in my coaching practice, which can be different than traditional therapy, is I will sometimes do individual sessions within a couple,
Yeah.
because I think it can be really helpful to um, A, get that individual's attention, but also B, practice saying things without having to filter or without having to be super careful so that you can start to learn how to have more radical honesty in the relationship container as well.
Yes, yeah, and same in my practice as well. And I share with clients too. It's not my secret to share. This is right. This is your thing to share, or this is your healing to do. But having privilege of knowing that information, I think it helps us as therapists and coaches to be able to help guide that conversation and create that safe space. And if partner B, right, is going into defensiveness or gaslighting or whatever is coming up. Yeah, we're there, right, to help guide that and make that a better experience.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Mm. Well, great. So in our previous conversation, you shared sort of a formula around rupture repair. Would you say that for affairs that it would be similar to that, or do you have specific things that you would mention for people going through affairs to be able to heal and navigate this?
Well, I think that repair formula is applicable for sure. I think what's important to note is that for complex ruptures, whether it's an affair or not, sometimes we have to have multiple repair conversations. So it's not just a single repair conversation. And that is always true with affairs. Um, that this is going to be something that you're going to have the repair multiple times in multiple different ways at different time points. Sometimes I've even worked with couples where repairs were years in the past and something comes up. I'm sorry, the affair was years in the past and something comes up and we need to revisit that and repair again in a new way years down the line. And I think to normalize that is really important. And what those repair conversations do is it really helps to have people feel understood and empathized with and get that accountability and reassurance. And what I would say is in the scope of an affair, or not even an affair that has happened, but somebody is flirting with the idea or toying with the idea of having an affair. We need to also address what's happening in the relationship itself that's leading one person to want to have an affair or to have the affair.
Mhm.
So, sometimes I'm working with couples to help them think about new ways to create novelty and adventure within the relationship, or how do they reignite passion and reinvest in their sexual intimacy. Maybe they'll see as new desires or role playing or whatever it is that's going to allow themselves to feel that kind of sexual spark again. Oftentimes, it's about helping them invest in their own relationship with themselves, their own independence, their own individuality, so that they can feel that sense of who am I in this relationship? Can I maintain my relationship with myself and with you without having to abandon one for the other? And what are the ways that I can have my own rich world and life that can create some mystery and something to share, something to bring back to the relationship that also creates some novelty and some rediscovery and exploration that can be really helpful in the personal growth and as well as the relational growth. Um, Oftentimes it's helping them create more uh, structures for affirmations and validation and appreciation so that they're not feeling taken for granted, or so that they're getting some of those needs for validation met, which is oftentimes what an affair is at least in part about, just feeling like I still got it, or I'm feeling seen in the ways I want to be seen. Um, and also sometimes it's about really kind of managing unrealistic expectations. What are the ways that we might think that our relationship should be that puts pressure on it, that can be um, adjusted so that folks can appreciate what is and make those changes in ways that feel accessible and impactful without invalidating that because you have this expectation that is going to make it feel like there's no way that this relationship could meet your needs.
Mhm. Yeah. And would you agree that so if a couple is going through this and one person isn't willing to step in and do the work, I guess more so if it's the person that had the affair, if they're just like, well, it is what it is, you need to get over it, it happened, right? These sort of responses. Um, I'm trying to like formulate what exactly I'm trying to ask here, but I think what I'm trying to ask is, do you notice things or would you validate when certain things are present in this dynamic? And again, a person is going to do what they're going to do. That's why I'm like, my words are not matching up well here, but essentially, when is it okay for somebody to throw in the towel? When would it be, when would a person be able to identify that I've done what I can, they're not holding up their end, and I need to move on and it's okay to move on?
I love that question. As we talked about in our last podcast episode, a repair is an investment in a relationship. And the work to heal from an affair, both the repair conversations as well as all of the other things I just talked about, is a huge investment in a relationship. And it requires that investment to build this new partnership that's going to potentially be more intimate and healthier and more nourishing. And it does take two to tango. And the I get really curious in these cases, does the other person not have the willingness or do they not have the ability? If
Mm-hmm.
they do not have the ability, great, no problem. I can come in, I can help, and I can really teach a lot of these skills and I can hold their hand and walk them through it. I think sometimes a person who was cheated on they might be so resentful or have so much contempt or hurt that they don't have the patience to wait for the other person to learn the skills, which, can be a challenging dynamic. But these are all skills we can learn, right? The willingness is a different topic. And if somebody doesn't have the willingness, I try to look into where are they feeling defensive? Where are they feeling protective? Where are they feeling hopeless or helpless? Is it really that they're just kind of over this person and they should have gotten a divorce, and instead of getting a divorce because that felt hard and scary or financially complicated, they just cheated? Okay, well then, yeah, my job is to help you two separate in a way that's going to be as least contentious as possible. But if it's, I just feel afraid, so I don't feel access to my willingness because of fear. And then we address the fear and we see what happens on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the challenges of affairs is that there is this socially prescriptive punishment for an affair, which is cheating, which is breaking up. And we know this because if you were ever cheated on and you stayed with the person, I'm sure your friends shamed you for staying with them. How could you stay with them? You should break up with them. You can never trust them again. And so I think that in some ways we're battling this idea that we can't heal from affairs, that we can never trust again, that this person, we should toss them out on the street. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really want to help people realize you don't have to, and you also don't have to stay. You don't have to try to repair. And part of my job is to help both parties really assess their willingness and their ability to do this hard work, realizing both people are going to have to show up for this hard work, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a lengthy process, and it will get better. But it's not going to happen, in 6 sessions. You'll be totally repaired, and have that rupture and that affair no longer be so a problem at all, right? That's the fantasy. And so part of it is really helping people realize the investment that's required and access their willingness and feel faith in their ability to learn how to do that, and to give permission for that to not be the case if that's not their truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wanted to touch on, and I'm just kind of reflecting on like my own past relationships. I've always been a serial monogamy dater, long-term relationships my whole life. And I think about, right, a high school relationship that I was in where this guy, cheated on me all the time. I knew about it. I'd get upset. We'd break up. We'd get back together. And I've done my own therapeutic work on this to be able to process, and I have a good understanding of why, but I thought it might be interesting to be able to talk through, right, the differences in that timeline of age, right? Somebody that is young, right, in a high school relationship, either doing the cheating or getting cheated on, and then how does that reflect to them in their adult relationships. Or right, it's a short-term relationship. Let's say, just you've just been seeing somebody a couple months and then you think it's just you and them, they're talking to other people, or right then versus a marriage versus a long-term relationship. Yeah, I'm just curious if you have insight on that or impact on that.
Yeah, I think part of what's challenging about being cheated on, especially when we're younger, which I can personally relate to, and especially repeated experiences of being cheated on, is we either or both will start to have poor self-esteem. We start to disbelieve that we have the qualities and the attributes and the desirability that somebody would want to be partnered with us and could commit to us. And so it erodes our sense of self-esteem. I think it also can erode our faith in other people.
Mhm.
I think all of my relationships until my 20s, I had been cheated on. And so took a long time for me to trust that somebody could not cheat on me,
Mhm.
and to trust that we could have the kind of relationship with radical honesty where we could move through the various phases of a relationship together with commitment and um, with integrity. And
Mhm.
so I think that that's part of the healing that needed to happen for me. I'm queer, but I think for me, I was cheated on by men. And so a lot of my work was restoring my faith in masculinity and in men, and not painting all men with the same, paintbrush of like, just incapable of a beautiful partnership.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And what would be your take on a phrase that I hear often is once a cheater, always a cheater? What is your belief on that?
I don't believe that. I think that there's a lot of growth that can be done if somebody is willing to look at why they cheated, and to look not just about what's happening in the relational dynamic, but what's happening inside, and develop better and healthier coping mechanisms. Then I don't believe once a cheater, always a cheater. I don't think that's true. Um, and what I'll also say is sometimes what happens for couples is they will open up their marriage. They'll open up their relationship and they'll start exploring non-monogamy. Now, I do not ever suggest exploring non-monogamy as a way to fix a relationship that does not feel healthy. It's not a way to fix an affair, but sometimes a opening up the relationship, and that doesn't mean radically open. All of a sudden you have multiple partners and boyfriends and girlfriends. There's so many different kinds of non-monogamy. But sometimes that's a way to navigate differences in desire, differences in libido, or whatever that may be. And when it's done ethically, which means consensually, which means all parties involved are opting in, or are having empowering conversations around agreements and needs, that is also sometimes an outcome that can be really revolutionary, where it doesn't have to be something that's outsourced unethically, but it can be outsourced ethically.
Yeah, thank you for that disclaimer. We do not recommend. I'm in the same camp as that. Yes, I think that opening a relationship when the trust and you have that good, solid, healthy foundation is in place to then open up the relationship. But yeah, as you said, definitely not a means to repair affair or fix anything or solve any problems. So yeah. As we're nearing the end of our conversation today, Dr. Ellie, is there anything else around affairs that you think is helpful for us to touch on in this topic, or any other things, resources that you would like to share with listeners?
Well, I think that when we're in the land of affairs, I just cannot recommend enough not going at it alone. Because the reality is that affairs are really nuanced, and they will manifest differently for different couples. And it's very hard to teach a workshop or course on how to heal from an affair, because what each couple needs is going to be different. And so I think it's really important to seek out a coach or a therapist. I also think that it's really important to use this as an opportunity to reinvest in your relationship, in your emotional intimacy, in your sexual intimacy, in physical affection, in romantic wooing. The course I teach called Sustainable Intimacy, Reignite the Flame for the Long Game, which is for both monogamous and non-monogamous couples, is an incredibly useful resource, because I'm teaching folks both what are the libido blockers, the things that have gotten in the way of them feeling close and intimate, but also what are concrete tools and practices and structures that can help folks learn how to reinvest in the intimacy of their own relationship. And I think that can be a helpful way to help folks get more of their needs met from the partnership.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you again for sharing those resources for people to check out. And as far as social media, are you present on social media? Please share your website again for listeners to be able to go to find these resources.
Yes, you can find me on social media at turnon.love, and that's also my website. And on my website, you can find a wide range of workshops, including one on repairing ruptures in relationships that you can rent from home, live workshops if you happen to be in the Bay Area. I also do virtual online courses and classes, and I have one coming up in January called Sexual and Emotional Intimacy Skills. It's a 2-month course I also teach at Stanford University. And this course is so helpful for individuals as well as couples. And I would also recommend it for folks who are navigating from affairs, because I do a lot of the skill building around how do we have the skills that we need and aren't taught to have healthy and sustainable emotional and sexual intimacy. And so you can go to my website or just go to turnon.love/intimacy. You can see the curriculum and all the reviews. I have a special discount code for this upcoming offering I'm going to share with your listeners. And if you're happening to listen to this podcast and it's not January through March when I teach it live online, you can also rent it on demand, which is always an option. And then you can also find out more about my coaching practice there and how I work with individuals and couples and the wide range of topics I support folks on. And so please feel free to reach out if I can be a support at all. And thank you so much for having me on your show and for geeking out with me and sharing your wisdom. And it's just really wonderful to know that resources like you exist for folks.
Yeah, and same. Again, I felt this whole conversation just felt so aligned in the way that we're helping people navigate these things, and it's always refreshing to know, again, there's people out there that can offer the support. And as you said, right, if somebody going through something like affair or having difficulty with the ruptures in their relationships, there's people out there to support you through that. You don't have to go at it alone. Yeah. So thank you. And yeah, again, we're putting a pin on having you come back for a whole different topic, talking about how to eat pussy like a champ. We have to mention that. So definitely, yeah, stay tuned. If you see Dr. Allie again on the show, that's what we'll be chatting about.
It's one of my favorite topics, and I look forward to chatting with you about that sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you really fucking loved it, make sure to tag me on social media at @TheRachelMain. I'll see you next week.